said that they should count the American Athletic Conference as as the sixth power conference, along with Big Ten, ACC, and all those guys. What are your thoughts on if the American Athletic Conference should be treated as a Power Six?
I actually saw this tweet. The athletic director put hashtag Power Six right after the committee rankings came out because he thought that UCF was being disrespected so much because they don't see them as a Power Five team. And at this point, I do not see the AAC as a power conference. I feel like they are the closest one out of any conference. I feel like they used to be, you can compare them to the Mountain West back when TCU played there, back when Boise State was there. Just power conferences that usually was the at-large bid for a New Year's Six Bowl. Now, I feel like they're very close to being a Power 5 conference, though. Navy's hasn't done that well this year, but they're perennially top 25 team. They're usually very impressive. SMU, a lot of talent on that team. Chad Morris, great head coach. Houston, a little bit of a downgrade without their coach this year, but still that's a team full of talent, and I think they can honestly have a good season next year. Memphis, 10-1, top 20. I think that's a very deservable ranking for them. I think that's exactly where they should be at in the college football playoff. They put 70 points on their opponent last week. Granted, it was Eastern Carolina. It wasn't the best team in the nation, but still 70 points is something to look at and be like, wow. I mean, I don't know if a lot of those Big 12, a lot of those Big 10 teams could do that, even in Eastern Carolina. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, you have USF and UCF, which USF used to be a top 20 team before they lost to Houston. And I honestly think they still deserve to be a top 25 team just because they've done great things. They held UCF to the wire. And I just feel like it's a very impressive team. I don't feel like they're quite there as a Power 6 conference yet, just because at the top they look good, or they look at least, better than the average mid team at Power 5 conference. They look better than the Purdue's and the Illinois', the Kansases of the other conferences. But at the bottom, they're just so bad. And I don't think you can overlook that when you consider them a Power 5 conference. They're just not good enough from top to bottom yet.
I'm gonna agree with you there. You look at some of these top teams: UCF, USF, Memphis, all great teams, arguably deserving of top 25 rankings. But then after those top three teams, you look at Temple with a 6-6 record going to a bowl game. Houston 7-4, which Houston is still a good team, but they're nowhere near what they were the past couple of years with Tom Herman as their head coach. Losing him, I think, really hurt them. They still have Ed Oliver on the defensive line, Outland Trophy finalist, one of the best defensive linemen, if not the best defensive lineman in the country, leading that defense. And then you got guys like SMU and Navy still there, and then at the bottom you got Tulane, who's 5-7, Tulsa 2-10, ECU 3-9, Cincinnati 4-8, UConn 3-9. There is just too much at the bottom that makes them too big of a liability. You look at in the Big 12, bottom two teams are Baylor and Kansas at 1-11. So both terrible seasons. But you go to the number 8 team, it's Texas Tech and Texas at 6-6. Mm-hmm. 8 out of 10 teams in the Big 12 are going to bowl games. You don't see that with the American Athletic Conference. Big 10, you have Illinois at 2-10, and then you got Rutgers, Maryland, Nebraska all at 4-8. But Illinois bad, Rutgers, Maryland much improved, Nebraska not a good season by any standards at all. But the top of their tier with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, that is, in my opinion, a lot better than UCF, USF, and Memphis.
And you even look at the lower teams in the Power 5 conferences like Nebraska, you look at Baylor. You take those teams, and I feel like they can both compete with, the number 2 or maybe number 3 teams in this conference. And that's not really something you can look at and be like, they deserve to be a Power 5 conference. If you told me if Houston played Baylor or Nebraska today, I'd take Baylor or Nebraska, not even going to think about it. Sure, they're not having the best seasons, but I know just those rosters have talent. Those rosters have just a lot more physical players. And honestly, I think they're just better teams from top to bottom.
And when you're looking at some of them, there's about 3 Power 5 conferences, or 3 Power 5 teams that I don't really think could compete with those top teams, and that's Kansas, Illinois, and Oregon State, which especially Kansas and Oregon State, both just terrible this year, posting 1-11 records, losing games in huge increments. North Carolina was able to hang in with some people, so I don't think that they even though being at the bottom of the ACC would really have difficulties winning most of these games. But then again, Illinois, 0-9 in Big Ten play, 2-10 on the season, just terrible. Then you look at a conference like the SEC, which has Arkansas at 4-8 and Tennessee at 4-8 at the bottom. I would gladly take Arkansas and Tennessee over pretty much any of these teams except maybe UCF, maybe Memphis. And with the SEC, 10 of their 14 teams in the conference are bowl eligible. In the American Athletic Conference, you have 5 teams that aren't out of their 12. So while it's not bad, but you look at them, you got 2 6-win teams, 2 7-win teams. It's not enough to carry them to be a new Power 6 school.
Say one more thing. Maryland, who played UCF this year, they hung on with them. To be honest, though, it was before they had that injury bug at quarterback that took out, I think, their top 3, maybe top 4 quarterbacks. But then they played Ohio State, Penn State, teams like that in the Big Ten, and they got blown out 65-0. Penn State played them a couple weeks ago, and I think beat them by like 50 or 60 points. And that's a type of talent that's sticking with their top teams in the conference. So although the top teams look nice, they look good on paper, we also take in effect they're playing these teams and they're barely sticking around, barely keeping up with the lower tier teams in the actual Power 5 conferences. So I think they deserve to be at that group of 5 now, but they're the group of 5 conference that's the closest to being a Power 5 conference.